a ceasefire plan for the war in Gaza has received the backing of the United Nations Security Council, which voted to support it. The proposal sets out conditions for a full and complete ceasefire, the release of hostages held by Hamas, the return of remains of dead hostages, and the exchange of Palestinian prisoners. We have details in this report.
14 of the 15 Security Council members voted in favor of the U.S. drafted resolution, but Russia abstained. The resolution states that Israel has accepted the ceasefire proposal and lobbies Hamas to agree to it. This means the UN Security Council has joined a number of governments as well as the G7 group of the world's richest nation in backing the three-part plan that was unveiled by President Joe Biden in a televised statement on the 31st of May. The proposal submitted by Israel to the U.S. and fellow mediators, Qatar and Egypt, has not been made public, and it is unclear whether it varies from what President Biden presented. The proposal was also agreed to by Israel's three-man war cabinet and has not been divulged to the wider government. Some far-right ministers have already made clear they oppose it. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not said directly whether he supports the plan as laid out by President Biden. The resolution was approved shortly after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with foreign leaders, including Mr. Netanyahu, in an attempt to build support for the ceasefire deal. Mr. Blinken said in a message to the leaders in the Middle East region that if they want a ceasefire, they should press Hamas to say yes.
And for more on the UN Security Council backing of the Gaza ceasefire plan, I'm joined by journalist Francis Hughes, live from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Mr. Hughes, thank you for joining us on the road now. All the 15 Security Council members voted in favor of this U.S. drafted resolution, except one. How do you react to that exception? The general expectation is everyone wants a ceasefire in Gaza.
Well, I don't believe that everyone does want a ceasefire in Gaza, and I understand the reservations that have been put forward by both China and Russia. If we look at what happened just the other day, 274 men, women and children summarily executed by what are purported to be members of the American Delta Force along with Israeli Special Forces. Over 400 people injured. There was talk of massacres in the streets in order for the assailants to make good their escape. They might have released 4 hostages, but they managed to kill 3 others at the same time. This US resolution comes hard on the heels of that botched raid with such a huge civilian casualty rate in Al-Nusrat refugee camp. The Americans are presenting a proposal that has been put forward by the Israelis. So in essence, this is an Israeli proposal. The Americans are fully complicit in all the deaths and the massacres and the starvations in Gaza, and their hypocrisy of building a pontoon bridge, supposedly to bring in more food, their hypocrisy in front of the Security Council, and indeed at the live interviews today in Jordan, where they claim to want to end civilian casualties, to bring in food, water and medicine, and to...
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the combination of raw ether material slabbed, stroked and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move way in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty, erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting, as the arts are meant to be.
Understand, was very clear to say that Israel is not in a haste to sign such proposal and that it's going to continue with this onslaught in Hamas. Is it quite clear whether Israel is really backing this one?
But what is quite clear to me is that Israel has agreed with the United States in the background to bring this proposal forward. Now, the proposal has the three different stages, beginning with the release of the hostages or the prisoners that are held by Palestinian resistance in Gaza today. Now, the only pressure on Netanyahu is not from the Security Council, it's not from the EU, it's not from the G7, it's certainly not from the United States, it's from the 100,000 Israelis on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem demanding that there is a release of the prisoners. So my interpretation of what is happening is that Netanyahu and the Americans want the hostages to be released. That was one of their first aims when they said that they brought this war on Gaza, was a release of the prisoners. And what they're going to do is they're only interested in releasing the prisoners. And once they come back to Israel, you can forget about a ceasefire. You can forget about Hamas's demands for an Israeli total withdrawal of the military occupation. And you can forget about Gaza being rebuilt in the short term. The Zionist apartheid regime has not destroyed 55% of residential homes, including infrastructure, schools, hospitals, sanitation, water recycling plants. So what the Israelis and what the Americans want is the hostages released. Once they're released, I firmly believe that the Israelis will continue with the war on the innocent civilian population of Gaza, as its aim now appears to be the ethnic cleansing through famine and through genocide of the people of Gaza. That is the end goal, not rebuilding and not a ceasefire and no reduction of the military occupation in Gaza going forward.
That is what you think the end goal is. At best, this is a ceasefire proposal because Israel has stated clearly, without mincing words, that it wants what it wants is to ensure that Gaza doesn't pose a threat in the future to Israel vis-a-vis what transpired on 7th October. How feasible do you think this would be beyond a ceasefire agreement?
We could have a permanent ceasefire tomorrow if Biden picks up the phone and says to Netanyahu and his war criminal cabinet there will be no more money, there will be no more political cover in the United Nations Security Council, there will be no more financial support, the $3.8 billion that is given as a subsidy to Israel every year, no more bullets, no more planes, no more bombs, no more tanks, no more ships. This could be over in 10 seconds if Biden picked up the phone. So Israel just intends to continue with the war. It claims that it's going to want some type of a buffer zone in northern Gaza. If they want the resistance to end, the resistance is a reaction to the occupation. End the occupation, allow the right of return to Palestinians under the United Nations Resolution 194 to Gaza, to the West Bank, to Israel or occupied Palestine, as many people refer to it. Once they end the apartheid military occupation of Palestine, the resistance will melt like snow in a ditch on a warm day. The resistance is a reaction to the occupation, and the occupation, end the resistance, everybody lives in peace.
How do you think world leaders can inspire sincerity of purpose on the table where these negotiations are being held without all of these, bickering and, the lack of trust that currently exists amongst the key players?
Well, first of all, you need two groups to want peace. The Israeli government and Israeli society does not want peace with the Palestinians. It wants another piece of Palestinian land. So that is the expansionism of the Zionist dream from the river to the sea, which is not only Palestine, but parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon, parts of Iraq, and parts of Egypt in the greater Zionist project. So we don't have the seeds for peace. We don't have the players who want peace. and Minsk agreement for 2 seconds. You had Macron and you had the French president, Hollande, I believe, at the time, who both agreed to the Minsk agreements as guarantors on behalf of Ukraine for the peace deal with Russia over the eastern Ukraine areas of the Donbass. They never intended to stand over those agreements. They lied to the Russians. They lied to their parliaments. They lied to the EU. They lied to the rest of the world. And we are somehow expecting other world leaders to be people of integrity and honesty and trustworthiness when we can see that Netanyahu has been involved in 5 previous wars on Gaza. His war criminal cabinet have all served in the military and probably all have blood on their hands from previous attacks on innocent people of Palestine and Lebanon. So I do not personally believe there is anybody in this equation outside of Hamas who truly want a ceasefire, who truly want an end to the violence, who truly want peace in the region, even with the Israelis, because they do recognize the Israeli state. It's the occupation that is the problem, and the occupation and the problem.
Good place to leave it. Francis Hughes, as a journalist from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
And that's the world now.